Welcome, Matthew Sanjari, to Coaching in Session. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Michael. How are you?
Doing all right. I had to go to the dentist. Business coach. All right. We're going to get into your profession. Now, I love having business coaches come on specifically for the reason being a lot of people in life in the world, they want to start a business. They want to get things going for themselves. They want to become financially free, especially with the upcoming generation. They want to get away from the 9 to 5 work life. And many people have no business acumen whatsoever. They start for the first time. They might be the first lineage, in all the generations of a business owner and entrepreneur. And many of them are looking and hungry for information. So I'm so happy to have you on to talk about your work. What got you into being a business coach?
Honestly, I fell into it by accident. It was not my original intention at all. I was a serial entrepreneur. I ran a marketing agency, marketing consulting firm, had a successful exit with that, started a real estate development company, had pastored on and off for about 12 years. And when I exited my last company, the marketing company, I basically said, hey, I'm going to take some time off. I deserve it. I've worked hard, the grind, the hustle. And I thought I'd take a few months. And after about day 4, I was like, no, I'm bored. We can't do this. We got to figure something out. An old client basically called me and said, hey, I love what you did for us, but it wasn't the marketing. It was your approach. It was how you would go through every process we had, every aspect of our workflow, from the client being interested to proper delivery, how you helped us find all the inefficiencies and how you helped us become more effective. Can you do this in the rest of our business? HR, sales, operations. And at first, I was like, this sounds incredible. What does it entail? And as I started to get into it, I was like, okay, this is a perfect fit. I started to do that, started to tell other people about it. And I started to realize that, my passion for seeing people reach their potential would tie in really, really well here as a business coach, because at the end of the day, businesses, organizations, startups, they're all run by people. So if we can get people performing at their highest potential, then the businesses will follow suit.
I am reading a book and I'm going to butcher this. So I'm going to try to dissect it as I can, as wonderfully as I possibly can. They talk about how, like in the 1920s or pre-1920s, people, they didn't really have a need for material things or, a want, right? Like they only got the things they needed. When the refrigerators were coming out and the washing machines and everything, they're like, we don't need that. But then the consumerism started to come in. Gradually, we started to become more consumer based. So now we want a lot of things. I want a nice, fast car. I want a nice, big house. I want nice clothes. I want nice things. And sometimes when people they start a business, they do it for the thrill of it, maybe for the passion. Sometimes they're trying to fill a gap in what people want and what people need, right? We can look at Zoom, for example. We are on Zoom right now, and during the pandemic, Zoom skyrocketed because everyone needed to have in-person meeting. Everyone was working remote. Schools were working remote, and they used Zoom as the platform to get that. I want to talk about the idea of understanding how a business can leverage that idea, because you were in marketing, so you know very well what people are looking for. And now we have a business owner trying to go through that workflow of everything that they need to go through in their systems. How can they target their niche audiences?
Yeah, Jim Collins, I believe it's Jim Collins. He wrote a great book. And basically, it's this idea that, let's start everything from the end, right? Let's always start with the end in mind. And I think as a culture, you mentioned consumerism, that's really kind of how we're already accustomed, a little acclimatized to, in your GPS, you put the destination in, and then the GPS calculates and figures out how to get there. So you actually are a little bit okay and a little bit trained with how do I work with the end. And I think that that's the right way to build business. The end, now, obviously, we have goals, we have different measures of success that can change. But when you start with the end in mind, that end in mind needs to be, what problem am I solving? More than the how, more than the what am I solving? And when you figure that out, it starts to become much easier to figure out, okay, well, who am I promoting it to? Well, who are the people that have these problems, right? Why am I doing this? Well, because I'm solving the problem for people in hopefully a better, more efficient, cost effective kind of way, depending on your niche or your industry. I think as long as we start with the end in mind, that is such a systematic way, just build out a better process and you're going to have a better start as a business.
Stephen Covey, he wrote the book Seven Habits of Highly Successful People, and he had that same begin with the end in mind. So I'm not sure if Jim Collin was the mentor or the mentee, but it's the same concept where it's like, let's understand where we want to go. I think many people today, when they want to become a business owner or an entrepreneur, they see the freedom. They want to retire early. And I don't think they did much work to understand what does that really entail. Do you just sit at home all day and hang out and watch Netflix and like, is that fun? And I mean, for me, I don't plan on retiring. 65? No, no thanks. I'll be 80 still cooking. That's the plan. That's what I would like to do because the moment I stop is the moment that I'm dead. I need to make sure I keep on moving. And most people, they become very complacent, they become stagnant at some point in their life. And it happens quite often in a business when it gets very difficult. Because especially in a new business, there's a lot of things that need to be done and completed. And you have to learn many different types of things. How can we start to educate new business owners better than just, trial and error type of mindset?
Yeah, that's such a great question. It's so funny because I think one of the things we do really, really well as a culture, that's also our downfall for business, is we love to sell the end. We can sell the result. Hey, financial freedom. Hey, freedom of time, without necessarily giving people an accurate picture of what it takes to get there. So when I say start with the end in mind, what I really mean is, let's take this image of you want to build a house, right? We can, for the most part, kind of envision maybe what we want our house to look like, just a general feel. Well, when you start with that, that's often how we go approach an architect, right? And the architect will tell me what you want. And their job is to take what's in our heart or what's in our mind and put it onto paper. And from there are different levels of detail and different levels that we need in order to hand things off, in order to delegate, in order to build out these things. This is what I call their strategy, their systems, and their structures. There's the three S's. It's really important. One of the things I do with all of my clients, and I actually have started to do with my life is, when we start with the end in mind, I love whether you're a visual person or not, you should do this exercise. You draw out a workflow, right? It can be ugly. I'm terrible at drawing, so trust me, take my word for it. But you start with the end in mind. Okay, you draw out the result and you start to work your way backwards on if I want to go to McDonald's and I want to be sitting there with a burger in my mouth. Well, before that, I had to place an order. And somewhere in between there, obviously, people were making the food. And before I placed the order, I had to walk up to the cash. And before I walked up to the cash, I had to arrive in the parking lot. And so you're starting to systematically draw this workflow of what it takes to get there. And as every single bubble that you draw, you start to realize, oh man, well, I had to get to the McDonald's. Do I have a car? No. Can I call an Uber? Can I bus? Can I train? You start to realize that there's different levels, there's different options that are available. And so I think drawing out a roadmap is so essential for anyone so they get an accurate picture of what it is that they're getting into. And so again, seeing the end in mind is a great starting place, but drawing out a workflow and doing it backwards is going to start to open up different avenues for a lot of people. I've seen it happen. I work with business owners who they'll say it's ridiculous. I don't want to draw it out. And they draw it out and they're like, oh, there's this and there's this and there's this. And you start to really realize and you start to maybe have a bit of a sobering thought of, okay, this is going to take time. It's going to take money. This is going to take human resources. And I think it's a really great place to start and it's going to give you an accurate picture.
I love the idea. It's going to take time and it's going to take money. And typically, one is going to be greater for someone. It's typically not both at the same time. If you have a lot of money, you're focused on time. If you don't have a lot of money, time is going to be irrelevant. You're focused on one or the other. And we do have to leverage it in a way that is going to be beneficial for the business owner, the employees, everyone, right? If we thought about the image of going to McDonald's again, some people will say, well, I want it in the quickest amount of time with the least amount of effort. I'm going to order DoorDash. I'm not going to go through all that. Probably, I got to go there, got to order, got to go back. I have to have cash, walk up to the counter, got to go to the parking lot. I got to make sure I don't run the stop sign. There's a lot of things going on as we're making our way there. A lot of people, they love comfort, they love shortcuts, they love easy. Because if we think about a to-do list, just any to-do list, what are the first things typically done on a to-do list? The easy things, right? Wake up in the morning, what's easy? The snooze button. Going to the bathroom, that's easy, right? What is maybe more difficult is maybe getting up, journaling, meditating. These things are not habits. We don't have the necessary, I'm not going to say skills. I do want to use the word habit again, to be good business owners. How can people start to get the mindset? And I'm very aware of the whole system of start with the end. How can we get the mindset to be a good business owner? Well, like we can give maybe your experience or maybe what you see in your work.
Yeah, great question. I think one of the biggest things, and this is a challenge for many, because I've had to go through it and I see my clients go through it all the time, is live in reality. We all want to live to some degree in a fantasy of the money we don't have, the time we wish we had, and maybe the talents that we see in others that we also wish we had. I think it's important to start in reality. You mentioned that at the end of the day, there's this dichotomy oftentimes where if you have money, time is super important because time is money. If you have less money, then time is a little bit irrelevant. Well, let's live in the reality. Do an honest assessment. I call them the three T's. There's time, there's treasure, and there's talent. Talent, your skills, treasure, your money, your energy level, what's available to you. Do an honest assessment. Where are you at with all three? Do you have the skills but lack the time? Do you have the money but maybe aren't so great in the other two? Whatever your starting point is, build on your starting point. That's going to be your most leveraging asset. So often I come across business owners, some of my clients who say, man, I can't wait to go on this endeavor. And I'm like, yeah, you definitely are skilled. And you know what? You've got the money to back it, but you have zero time. You have two options. Because when you live in reality, you get to say, what do I have to work with? And what can I make with what I have to work with? That's reality. So, I was just recently dealing with a client who wants to launch two different endeavors this year. Successful business, this conversation. And I said, well, great. You don't have the time to do it. You've got the money, you've got the skills. So we've got two options. And those options are you can either outsource some of the things you're doing, train somebody up and delegate it to free up your time, or you can actually commission this to somebody else. It may not be what you want it to be. It may not be your baby, but it'll still get done, right? But that conversation has to come from living in a place of reality. I think it's important that we all take inventory of where we sit in the three T's, because your time, your treasure, your talent, some combination of those three are going to be an indicator of how you can move forward.
When do you think people have lost the idea of reality? Because this is something that many people are struggling with. This is something that have seen when I was a teacher teaching in the public schools. And I just read a great book. It's called Weapons of Mass Instruction. Wonderful read. If you are a teacher, read it. Parent, read it. Anyone, read it. It really pinpoints what the public schools do. And it does create a bit of reality structure fault, because now we're thinking, oh, we can just do this and we get this. Think of it as I'm going to spend $150,000 going to college, and this degree is going to make me all of this money. Do you know how many people continue with their degree 5 years after? Not. It's crazy. I think only like 40% or something like that. That means what, 60% of people have a degree that they don't even use. They did it for the thrill of it. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't seek education. It's just that I guess, that person or that individual didn't begin with the end in mind. Did you need that degree? Sometimes you do, right? If you're a doctor, if you're a lawyer, if you're a teacher, you need a teaching degree. You have to have a degree. But if you are going to, let's say you want to be an event planner, you don't need a degree. Yes, you can get the connections you need and the skills you need, but you can get that from podcasts, from books, from a business coach that has connections. All of this right here is the new age of education. Now that education is starting to shift, is the reality starting to shift also? Because it seems like people are becoming more delusional day by day. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think it's so true. And you know what? This is true for all of us. I am not exempt from this. You are not exempt from this. The truth is, I believe that most people mean well, but what we do is we latch on to these hypotheticals and we put our faith in a lot of hypotheticals. Let's make it clear. I am pro goals. I am for dreaming. But what I'm not for is people continuing to process their decision making through things that haven't happened yet. Your decision should be made with what's tangible and it's in front of you. And then obviously, if you have goals, you're building towards those things. But you're flexible enough to say, if that seems out of reach based on my constant reassessing of where we are and where I'm at, then that's okay. We can pivot. But oftentimes, people that have an all or nothing mindset, it's because they're living in this idea of something that hasn't, right? When I get that job. Oh, when I hit that $200,000. Oh, what about when you have the money in your account right now? I think so often what we do is we make goals on hypotheticals when what we should do is we should make goals on we should make resource-based goals, right? So time, treasure, and talent. It's not when I get to $1 million, I'll invest. It's when I have this much time, this much knowledge, and this much in my bank account, a combination of these three, then I will go invest. Why? Because then the onus is on me. I could have the money or might not have the money, but I need to go learn the skill that's active. I need to go actually put myself in these situations. So I think living in reality is always, we need to encourage people to take inventory, right? Inventory is neither good nor bad. It may seem bad to you, it might seem good to you. Inventory is just reality. And when we do that, we can actually make concrete decisions. But I do think it's really hard because going back to the consumer mindset, we live in a society and we live in a bit of a reality that is constantly selling us a fantasy. And that fantasy is oftentimes a lot more work than we're prepared to put in.
Let's run the numbers because I think that's going to be important for people at this point. I'm going to need your help, Matthew, with this because I need a realistic number for what people have as disposable income in their bank account today. Is it like 500, $1,000? Would you say they have that to work with?
Yeah, well, let's run with 1,000.
1,000. Okay. So we have $1,000. And let's say the business is a t-shirt making business. Now, folks, I understand you might not have a t-shirt making business. If you have a specific business that you need help with, reach out to Matthew again. Links could be in the description box below. So we're going to get there. But we're doing a t-shirt business as the example. We have $1,000. We are starting a t-shirt business. Where do we begin?
Yeah, great question. $1,000 isn't a lot of money, right? $1,000 is not a lot of money for supplies. It's not a lot of money for marketing. And if you try and spread it across both, you're probably not going to have much of anything. What would make the most sense is to try and find something that you can leverage to not have to use most of your capital. I'll give you an example. If we're talking t-shirts, as opposed to going in and saying, I'm going to go start my own line, I'm going to go order all this inventory when I don't know if it's going to sell or if it's going to work, I'm going to drop ship. I'm going to go find an opportunity where I'm not putting out so much money up front, or I'm not even buying something until I've made a sale. That allows me to spend the majority of my money, my available funds, on attracting sales. I think that's where people need to focus on. The goal is always, how do I turn one of my three T's into more money? And oftentimes we invest or we spend on things that we hope will have a return, but we're not sure. In the example of t-shirts, I can go spend $1,000 on inventory and then I can go on a street corner and hope that they sell. Again, fantasy. I'm hoping that they sell. Or I can spend $1,000, right? And basically try and guarantee myself that I get a sale, right? Knocking on doors, doing free things, so that when I get a sale, I now use my $1,000 as leverage. Okay, I'm going to go buy the product, fill it, right? So I'm guaranteeing myself that my $1,000, obviously there's so many other factors, is being used to generate revenue, not hoping that it'll generate revenue. That's the way how I would approach it.
And most people don't do that. Most people do the opposite. They get the inventory and then they try to go get the sales.
Totally. Right. Because again, don't be wrong, having that is a much, much higher profit margin. But do you really want to take on that risk?
But most people, they don't necessarily look at risk. They see opportunity. Again, they have that mindset of, I think I can do it. I know I can do it. Oh, this is pretty hard. Let me stop.
I just had this conversation with someone. They asked me, they said, should everyone become an entrepreneur? And I had said, the old me, the idealist me would have said, yes, everyone needs to be free. Everyone needs to. And I think the truth is everybody's got an entrepreneurial streak in them, but not everyone's an entrepreneur. If you're a parent, you've got an entrepreneurial streak in you. You're pioneering something. I've seen, managers, when a manager or an employee says, leave this with me, I'll take care of it. That's entrepreneurial. The truth is, the difference between an entrepreneur and people that just have the streak is often risk management. Most entrepreneurs are just willing to accept more risk because they see the opportunity. I think inevitably risk management is a really important part, right? In your t-shirt scenario, you can the person who potentially goes and builds out systems and structures and even does the right marketing thing, they could still lose $1,000 because at the end of the day, all the systems in the world will fail if we don't have sales. There's something to be said about leverage, and there's something to be said about risk management. Again, living in the reality of I have $1,000. How can I make this $1,000 go the furthest? Not how can I turn this $1,000 into $1 million tomorrow?
Very similar to like leadership. Like we all can develop leadership skills. Some people are really good bosses. Some people need to work on it a little bit more. I believe anyone who's listening can recall a job and they can either have a good boss or a bad boss. Like I love this boss, even if, there were some times when you might have not loved them because they made you work extra or there's no Christmas bonus, right? We can like bypass those little things, but like were they a good business person? And sometimes people just have that, strong business acumen. They just know what to do. Like boom, boom, boom. They can see it right in front of their eyes. Do you think that's a genius? Like they just have that like, okay, they're just really strong business professionals. Think of like Rockefeller investing with Warren Buffett, things along those lines. Like, is it a genius or is it a skill that we learn as we go?
Honestly, I think it's both, right? I think, let's take athletes. There are some athletes that are incredibly gifted right off the hop. And of those athletes, some of them make it and some of them don't. And then there's people who are not gifted athletes. And some of them make it and some of them don't. I think it's really easy to live in a binary world. And what we need to do, going back to the three T's, is time, treasure, and talent. We've got one of them. Everybody's got at least one of them. So the idea isn't, can I have all three? Was I born with this or do I have to develop this? It's okay, what do I have of these three? Maybe I have time, but I don't have money or talent. That's fine. Then now you live in a reality where you say, well, I can choose to be better at one of these things. I can choose to develop it. Because at the end of the day, being born with a skill set and not knowing how to use it is also not going to get you the result that you want. I think it's really, really important. Again, going back to this, and I know it sounds like a bit of a repeating wheel here, this idea of living in reality when it comes to business. Do I have this innate skill? No. Then I have an opportunity to go learn it, resource myself, lean on other people. And if I do have it, great. Then I can use it, I can grow it. There's so many options. But again, it's about acknowledging and accepting, what do I have? I mean, just quickly, when I started my marketing business, I was one person. Eventually, I grew to a team of 8. I had 7 team members, but in the beginning, I had to do everything. If you needed HR, I was HR. If you needed finance, I was finance. And let me tell you, I didn't know the majority of those things, right? And so at the end of the day, even though I had some innate business sense and there were some skill sets that I was really good at, I had to make a conscious decision. And I didn't for the first 3 years. A lot of my business was on the verge of failing for the first 3 years. I had to make a conscious decision. I can either choose to be better or I can just kind of live in this survival mode.
Well, I don't mean to be a negative Nancy or anything, but how can someone know that they should quit or try harder?
Man, that's a really good question. I think that sometimes the journey of an entrepreneur, I think a lot of entrepreneurs make their journey very lonely. There's almost this idea that, because you're in this skill set or you're an owner or you're working somewhere, that nobody's going to understand me. Nobody's going to relate to me. And it's true. You may not find someone who's in the exact same situation as you. But I think that there's so much wisdom in getting counsel and getting advice and opening up to hopefully trusted people. But I think that more often than not, if you're willing to open yourself up and kind of hear people out and see, there's so many resources out there that you're going to get a pretty good picture. I think, again, to tie it back to reality, so many people refuse to live in reality even after they seek these things out. And that's oftentimes why people are led to failure or, things kind of blow up in their face. But I strongly encourage people all the time, go seek out advice. There's so many resources. There's so many, you can pay a coach, you can talk to a consultant, you can even seek a friend. There's so many people out there, sometimes family members, people, anybody who's got an experience, right? They may not have run a business, but they might have worked in sales. They may not have been an entrepreneur, but that person who's been doing admin for 30 years probably has an understanding of business operations. Seek out advice because it's going to give you more options and give you more understanding of what you're going through.
Yeah, and you're 100% correct. There are so many mentors, people who have retired who are taking on mentees, new business owners, and they have questions. And you can even go as far to get a coach, business coach that is going to hold you accountable, be there to answer any questions you may have. But then also that loneliness factor, right? You have somebody walking with you. And think of it as if you're going into war. If you have an army behind your back, like think of the kings, on their horse, they have a whole army behind their back. They're brave. They're ready. It doesn't matter. All right. I got my men, I got my army. We're about to get busy. And in America, especially, we have become individualized. We do everything by ourselves. Think of it from the schools, we sit by ourselves, we do our tests by ourselves, we cover our paper, we learn to do things by ourselves. We don't necessarily learn to ask for help. And then eventually, when you're old enough, you get your own apartment, your own house, and you separate from your family. But yet, if we look at other cultures and other nations, that doesn't necessarily happen like that. Typically, everyone pulls their money in together and they're going to be in a better situation because they have more resources to work with. Think of that $1,000 that we talked about with the t-shirt business. Imagine if you did it with some friends and everyone had $1,000. And I'm not saying that you just need to pick some friends and start a business idea. That could be a bad idea. What I'm saying is we can focus on the idea of utilizing community and having people work together. And that's why I love coaching, because it's one of those things that people don't necessarily know they need until they try it. And typically, when people finally get coaching, they're like, oh, wow, like this is good. Like they think it's like going to the dentist or going to a doctor they don't like if they need like a colonoscopy or something, like things that people don't like to get done. Optometrists, I don't know if people like it or not, but there's certain doctors you avoid, and there's certain things we avoid naturally, like doing taxes. People wait until April 15th here in America to do taxes because they give that idea of fear of this is not fun to themselves. But if you had a team of go-getters, or you just had a person that's saying, hey, you can do this, and all the way looking at all your blind spots, because we all have them. I have plenty, and I need people to tell me, hey, this is where you can improve. This is where you can be better, because from there, I get better. I can see why so many people love your approach. From just speaking with you today, your acronyms, your three S's, your strategy, system structures, your T's, time, treasure, talent, like all of these things are powerful. And it might not seem like that initially. If you rewind and you listen to an episode, you start to see all of the emotions in there, right? The aspect of caring. You need that, especially when you have a baby. You're in the business as the baby, okay? So you have something you're trying to grow and develop. And if you feel stuck, or if you feel like you can't do it, that's when you should, I'm not going to say bite the bullet, but you should give in to, your innate thinking of doing it by yourself and learn to do it together. So Matthew, I loved our conversation today. As we begin to wrap up, give us some final words and tell the audience where they can find you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Honestly, I really enjoyed the conversation. But one of the main questions that I always ask people before I start working with them is I say, hey, you know what? God forbid, if something were to happen to you, whether it's a startup or an established business, if something were to happen to you and you were unreachable for a month, you just left and your business was on its own. When you came back after a month, what would your business look like? Oftentimes, it's the same reaction, right? There's kind of this panic, and people just kind of laugh, and then they realize, oh, I wouldn't have a business left. And I often say to them, I say, then you don't have a business, you have a job. Because when you don't show up to your job, you don't get paid. And the reason why I say that is it's really important for people, even starting out, whether you're a solopreneur, whether you want to start up, have a plan to involve other people. Don't just build with yourself in mind, with your own goals in mind. You touched on it. It's very much a cultural thing for many of the cultures of the world, but have a plan, right? Even if you don't have the resources right now, make it a priority to say, I'm going to build a business, existing or not, that is going to function in spite of me, because that's one of the biggest things that I run up against often. And I love to see people actually feel the freedom of knowing that this thing will survive, whether I'm here or not.
And how can people find you?
Yeah, people can find me at consultingbyprime.com, consultingbyprime.com, or I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn, Matthew Sanjari, Sanjari. That's Sanjari.
And I'm gonna make it easy for everyone so they don't get anything misspelled. Just click the link in the description box below. Check him out on his website, follow him, or connect with him on LinkedIn and learn how he can help your business, whether you're starting off, whether you're in the middle, trying to get through that slump, or you are someone who's successful and you're looking to expand. There's many different avenues when it comes to having a successful business, but you want to make sure you have someone who has been tried and tested, has done the work already, and is going to be on your team helping make sure that you don't fall into those pitfalls that might be right in front of you and you just don't see it yet. So I want to thank you so much, Matthew, again for coming on, spending some time and talking about your work.
Thanks for having me, man. Really appreciated it.